You're locked into Dodor 5 FM from Little Haiti to the world. And right now, it's time to dive in. This is Dodor Vibe Deep Dive, your rundown of the top stories that mattered this week, from Haiti to the US, Port-au-Prince to Paris, and across the Caribbean diaspora. News, culture, and headlines that hit home. Whether you missed it or need a recap, we've got you. This is Dodor Vibe Deep Dive, and it starts right now. Let's go. June 17th to June 23rd, 2025.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at Haiti. It's an incredibly complex situation, rapidly evolving, and, well, it's having these profound ripple effects both inside the country and, frankly, across the globe. We've gathered a range of sources, trying to get a multifaceted view, covering everything from U.S. immigration policy shifts to security challenges, internal governance, that kind of thing.
Right.
Our mission, really, is to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights, to give you a clear, informed understanding of what's actually happening.
And I think what's really crucial to grasp right at the start is how interconnected all these issues are. It's not just one problem. Haiti's facing a convergence of crises.
Yeah.
And our sources, they offer more than just facts. They bring in personal stories, expert analysis. You really need that to grasp the gravity of it all.
Absolutely. And that's the first key thing, isn't it? This isn't just about abstract headlines. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives directly impacted by policy changes, by this escalating instability. It really shows how individual lives are just so tied to these huge political and social shifts. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start close to home, actually, right here in the United States. Specifically, the immediate crisis facing Haitians living in places like Florida. Our sources are telling us that recent immigration actions have just created this immense fear of arrest, deportation, families being torn apart, hitting them, as one source put it, as hard as a hurricane.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is, and the numbers are significant. We're talking about around 500,000 Haitians, many in South Florida, who are set to lose their temporary protected status, that's TPS, on August 3rd.
Right, TPS, that's the status for folks from countries facing conflict or disaster.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's another 211,000 Haitians on humanitarian parole who are also at risk. Now, this stems from a couple of Supreme Court rulings and policy changes under former President Trump, including a travel ban to and from Haiti.
And the reported goal behind this.
According to the sources, it's part of a bid for what could be the largest mass deportation in U.S. history.
Quite something.
And the human stories behind these policies, these numbers, they're just heartbreaking. Take Goliath, a security guard. Arrived in South Florida in 2024, he describes feeling trapped in hell, just constant paranoia about ICE agents.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, yeah.
Right. He's having nightmares about being sent back to the gang violence he fled.
Understandable fear.
And then you have people like Louis. He's worked at Home Depot since 2008. Or Renee, a sales manager at a software company. They represent thousands more, just terrified of losing everything they've built, being separated from their families.
And connecting that to the bigger picture. These aren't just individual tragedies, are they? There are wider implications, especially, like you said, for Florida's economy.
Definitely.
And it really makes you question the whole nature of these temporary protections. What does temporary really mean in practice?
That's a key question.
U.S. Representative Sheila Cherfels McCormick, her parents were Haitian immigrants. She's warning that South Florida's economy could potentially collapse.
Collapse. That's strong language.
It is. She points to major labor shortages coming at healthcare, hospitality, construction, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of nurses, farm workers, laborers potentially being forced out. And Nicholas Andre, a professor at Florida International University, he called these recent arrivals the backbone of Florida's economy.
The backbone.
Yeah. Their absence would be a huge loss, he says, not just for employers, but even big retailers like Walmart and Amazon. They stand to lose hundreds of thousands of customers. We're even hearing reports about silent mass firings starting already.
Silent firings?
And the emotional toll, it's immense. Attorney Burns Guillaume talks about seeing hopeless faces, frantic single mothers looking for answers he just can't give them, people potentially being forced into the shadows.
Living undocumented.
Exactly. And then Thierry Isaac, a behavioral therapist, he's seeing intense fear and anxiety among Haitian students. He's worried about the long-term mental health impact.
It's a really grim picture. But here's where it gets particularly jarring. Disturbing, really. There are reports that some Haitians are being transferred to and then deported from the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Guantanamo, for deportation.
Yes. Despite initial denials from the Trump administration, our sources detail that just recently, 20 Haitians were flown directly from Guantanamo to Port-au-Prince.
Okay.
Now, some were picked up at sea, but others had actually been transferred there from IC detention inside the U.S.
Transferred from the U.S. mainland to Guantanamo, then deported.
That's what the reports indicate. And just think about the conditions they're being sent back to in Port-au-Prince. Extremely dangerous.
Yeah, we know the situation there is dire.
The airport itself. The FAA has banned U.S. commercial and cargo flights there since November because of gang attacks. That ban is still ongoing. Gangs control most of the roads. The whole city area recently had a blackout because of protests. I mean, sending anyone back there right now is incredibly perilous.
Wow. And using Guantanamo for this, that has a very specific and, frankly, dark historical echo, doesn't it? And serious legal implications for civilian migrants.
Exactly. Tell us more about that.
Well, former President Trump actually issued a directive to dramatically expand Guantanamo's capacity. We're talking about holding up to 30,000 migrants.
30,000.
A huge expansion. And advocates, lawyers like Gerline Joseph from the Haitian Bridge Alliance, they've raised major red flags. They call these transfers covert, a flagrant violation of international human rights and civil liberties.
Covert.
And Joseph specifically points to Guantanamo's past as a black site. You know, these secret detention spots. Haitians were held there back in the 1990s, often without lawyers, without due process. She reminds us about 34,000 Haitians were detained there after the coup in the early 90s, held in inhumane conditions.
34,000?
Yeah. And get this, a federal court actually ordered the facility closed to migrants back in 1993.
It did?
Yes. But the U.S. apparently continued using it for that purpose anyway, kind of quietly. So using it now for civilian migrants transferred from the U.S., it raises profound questions about due process humanitarian standards. It's essentially repurposing a site with a really grim history.
Okay, so that's the situation facing Haitians interacting with the U.S. system. But what about inside Haiti itself? Let's shift focus there. The internal crises, particularly this fight against armed gangs.
Which is escalating badly.
Right. And the Haitian government, according to our sources, has acknowledged using a pretty controversial strategy, bringing in foreign contractors, mercenaries, essentially.
Private security firms.
Exactly. Fritz Alphonse, he's the head of Haiti's presidential transition panel. He openly confirmed they're using foreign contractors. Why? Because the national police are just too weak, he said.
Okay, acknowledging the weakness. But what about transparency?
Well, that's the thing. There seems to be very little. Jean refused to give any detail. No name of the firm, no contract amount, no specifics on what they're obligated to do. Even though there are reports, it's costing something like $44 million.
$44 million with no public details.
Apparently not. And then there's the name Eric Prince floating around, you know, the former head of Blackwater.
Right, that name definitely raises eyebrows given Blackwater's history.
His new firm is reportedly involved, overseeing the dropping of weaponized explosive drones into gang strongholds.
Weaponized drones operated by private contractors. That immediately raises huge questions about accountability, doesn't it? And how effective is this really long term, especially with all the secrecy?
Yeah.
Human rights groups like Fondation Jaclaire, that's Eyes Wide Open Foundation, they're demanding clarity. They want to see the contracts, know the rules of engagement, what obligations these mercenaries have to limit collateral damage, harm to civilians.
Which is crucial given the security situation.
Absolutely critical. We're talking gangs controlling maybe up to 90% of Port-au-Prince now, and they're pushing outwards into other regions.
90%.
It's staggering. And people are desperate.
Yeah.
We saw that incident where residents in Mirabelais actually sabotaged a power plant, plunging Port-au-Prince into darkness, trying to force the government to act against the gangs.
Desperate measures.
And what's really concerning is this dangerous escalation. It's not just contractors using drones. The gangs themselves are trying to get them, or even build them.
The gangs want drones too?
Yeah. There were arrests in the Dominican Republic, people trying to buy drones for gangs. And tragically, one gang member reportedly died from burns, trying to make a weaponized drone himself. It's turning into a sort of high-tech, very dangerous arms race.
Unbelievable. So alongside this fight against gangs, Haiti's own transitional government is struggling.
Deeply.
Our sources point to ongoing infighting dysfunction within this 9-member presidential transitional council. And that's just fueling frustration, both in Haiti and internationally.
Yeah, they were supposed to lead the country back to democracy.
Right. But their mandate might actually run out before they manage to get a new president elected or a new constitution sorted.
Which leaves the country in limbo.
Exactly. And there's a report from the National Human Rights Defense Network. It's pretty scathing. It accuses the council of failing to deliver on promises, systematically draining the state's coffers.
Draining the coffers.
Yeah, and receiving unjustified privileges. Things like taking at least 15 foreign trips. Plus, there's an unresolved bank bribery scandal hanging over 3 of the council members. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence, you know?
No, it certainly doesn't. And what's fascinating, in a terrible way, is how these governance problems directly fuel the human rights disaster on the ground. It's a vicious cycle.
How's that?
Well, that same human rights report paints a really stark picture. Since the council took over, they've recorded at least 13 massacres and armed attacks.
13 massacres.
Leading to, get this, 4,405 murders between April 2024 and March 2025.
4,400.
And 805 of those were just in the first 3 months of this year. The human loss, the material loss, it's immense.
A staggering number.
And look at the specific impacts. 3,792 women and girls victims of sexual and gender-based violence. Security forces hit hard too. 31 police officers killed, 8 Army soldiers, 2 agents from the multinational security support mission.
Even the international forces are being killed.
Yes, and journalists aren't safe either. 2 killed, multiple attacks on media companies. It just creates this atmosphere of pervasive violence and impunity.
And what about that multinational security support mission, the Kenyan-led one?
That's another huge question mark. Its fate is really unknown right now. Will they stay? Will the next rotation happen? Who's funding it long term? Will the U.S. keep funding the base? Lots of uncertainties surrounding that international support.
So instability on all fronts. Now, let's try and connect these current crises to something deeper, this long shadow of political violence in Haiti's history. It seems like it continues to shape the present, even reaching individuals who've made it to the U.S.
It absolutely does.
We have this case, Jean-Maurice Villena, a former Haitian mayor. He was just sentenced to 9 years in a U.S. prison. Why? Visa fraud.
Okay, visa fraud. But what's the connection to political violence?
Well, the fraud was that he illegally got his green card by hiding his role in what the prosecutors called a brutal campaign back in Haiti to kill and torture his political opponents.
Ah, so the visa fraud was concealing alleged atrocities. That's fascinating. It shows how past violence follows people and how legal systems try to catch up, even across borders.
Exactly. What more can you tell us about the legal side of this?
Well, prosecutors called it the most egregious type of immigration fraud because on his visa application back in 2008, Villena specifically had to state whether he had ever ordered, carried out, or materially assisted in extrajudicial and political killings and other acts of violence. He said no.
But the allegations were that he did.
Precisely. Prosecutors argued that after he was elected mayor of Liseroy in 2006, he personally committed or ordered attacks on his adversaries. They gave examples. Like in 2007, leading armed men to the home of David Boniface, where Boniface's brother was shot and killed. And in 2008, mobilizing a group to attack Juders Yasumi and Nisaj Martyr at a community radio station, beating and shooting them.
Just brutal acts alleged.
Yes. And crucially, besides the criminal conviction for visa fraud, Villena was also ordered to pay $15.5 million in his separate civil case.
$15 million? How did that happen?
Under something called the Torture Victim Protection Act. It's a significant U.S. law. It allows victims to sue foreign officials in U.S. courts for extrajudicial killing or torture, but usually only when they can't get justice in their home country.
So it provides an avenue for justice here when it's blocked there.
Exactly. It really demonstrates the potential reach of justice, holding perpetrators accountable even years later and across borders.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The immigration crisis hitting Haitians in the U.S., the internal security nightmare with gangs and contractors, the government struggles, and this long history of violence. What does this all mean for you, someone trying to make sense of Haiti?
Well, I think it really shows just how multifaceted these challenges are, doesn't it?
Yes.
From the deeply personal fear of deportation and the potential economic fallout in a place like Florida,
right,
to the really dangerous internal fight against gangs involving these shadowy foreign contractors, and then these deep roots of political violence that just keep surfacing.
And if you connect it all up, it really highlights how deeply global policies and local realities are intertwined. One decision in Washington or Geneva can have massive immediate consequences on the ground in Port-au-Prince or for a family in Miami.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, underscores the incredible resilience of the Haitian community. Our sources mention this too, how Haitians have prospered in places like South Florida. They've built communities, raised professionals, lawyers, doctors, even elected officials. That's important to remember.
It is. And yet now they face this threat of having decades of that community building just dismantled. You hear voices like Reverend Pierre Aydou saying Haitians are contributing to make America a better country. And that resonates really strongly against this backdrop of crisis.
Absolutely. We've seen how a nation's internal struggles can trigger a mass exodus, which then creates whole new sets of challenges for the countries receiving them. And at the same time, how historical violence can literally follow individuals across continents, demanding justice years later. This deep dive really paints a picture, I think, of a nation and its diaspora, grappling with just immense uncertainty and these huge systemic challenges.
A very complex and sobering picture.
So as you reflect on all this, here's something to consider. What are the long-term costs, societal, economic, not just for Haiti, but maybe for any country, when transparency is limited around critical decisions? Decisions like mass deportations or using private military forces. How does that lack of information ultimately impact trust and stability, both at home and abroad?
And that's your deep dive. The headlines, the stories, the voices that matter, brought to you by Dodor Vibe FM. Catch us every week for a recap of the news that moves our people, our culture, and our world. Missed part of the show? No stress. Replays continue all week and are always on dodorvibe.com and on our socials at Dodor Vibe. Until next time, stay sharp, stay loud, and stay connected. This has been Dodor Vibe Deep Dive from Little Haiti to the world.